Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk to you about why we chose and continue to choose to live in Spain instead of Mexico. So, over the past 4.5 years, I've made tons of content about why we moved to Spain, how we ended up living in Zaragoza, that we've lived in Murcia before in the city, that we lived in the city of Madrid, and why we ultimately ended up coming back to Zaragoza last year, and what our life is like here, and why I think that it's a good city to move to, especially when you've just come to Spain. But what you may not know is that we're always thinking about where else we could move. I mean, Spain is great, but there are other countries, there are other reasons that we might want to leave Spain. Two of those countries that we would possibly move to are Mexico, where we've lived before, and Ireland. Ireland has always been on our list of possibilities for places to move to after my husband got citizenship in Spain. It's just been a matter of should we do it or should we not do it? And if we do it, when? When is the right time? Is there a right time? Will there ever be a right time? We always live kind of with the doors always open. One foot is always out the door, always thinking about what the possibilities are, where we could go. Probably a lot of people who live like us think the same way. So let's go back to Mexico. Why don't we actually go back to Mexico? Well, there are many positives for us when it comes to living in Mexico. I mean, I even keep the flag in my house, okay? There are many positives for us when it comes to moving back to Mexico, believe it or not. Not only would we be closer to family in the United States, which means that we would be able to make more frequent flights. We'd be able to afford the flights more easily. They cost less money. The distance is shorter. We could go back for 3 or 4 days instead of having to make it 7 to 10 days. We could go back every 6 months, every 9 months, once a month. I mean, you never know. It'd be a lot easier even to make an emergency trip. Not only that, but one of the reasons why we wanted to move to Mexico in the beginning, one of the benefits was that we could drive. We could drive our car. It was on the same continent. It's that much easier to get back home in case we couldn't fly. We always had the option to drive. Well, we definitely cannot drive to the United States from Spain. So aside from the proximity to the United States, access to family in the United States, and the cheaper flights in the United States, we also do have family in Mexico. So it is nice to have the opportunity, and it was nice to have the opportunity while we were there to get to know some of that family that's actually family of my husband's who he didn't grow up with. So it was nice just to get to know people there and to have those opportunities, and we don't have them here unless they come to Spain, which they do sometimes, but normally not. So the next reason of why we would want to move to Mexico is because of the taxes. The taxes in Spain are high. The tax burden is high. Spain is not a place that has a system down for for supporting entrepreneurs. So it's very difficult, and living in Mexico, we actually wouldn't have to pay income taxes on our foreign earned income as long as we kept it outside of the country. Whereas here in Spain, you have to pay taxes on worldwide income. So that's a huge benefit for us. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of euros, which is a high number that we pay here, in Spain that we wouldn't have to pay in Mexico. But then we have to figure out what the payoff is on that, okay? What do we get here that we wouldn't get there? That's the question. Some of the things that we get in Spain that we did not get in Mexico is access to great health care, access for our kids to really great education, even though in Mexico, the benefit with the education system is that we had the freedom to home educate, which we do not have here. But the education system here, and I'm talking about higher education, university level education, is much more affordable than it is in the United States, but it's also much safer than it is in Mexico. I don't happen to believe that university students are that safe and secure in Mexico. Kids here can go out from a very young age on their own in Spain and do things independently, whereas in Mexico, they really can't. Some other benefits for us living in Spain is the immersion into the language. Now, when I lived in Mexico, no one would really talk to me. They would talk to my husband. They would assume that because of what I looked like, that I didn't speak Spanish. That's because in Mexico, I stood out. I stood out as different. I have blonde hair and blue eyes and pale, skin. And I don't look Mexican. I don't look Latin American. And so obviously I stood out, and they just automatically assumed that I don't speak Spanish. Even now, if I was to return, they would make that assumption strictly based on what I look like. They would just not speak to me, not look at me. They'd always go with my husband. Now, when I got to Spain, I was really surprised that people would just turn around and start talking to me. Granted, I did not know what they were saying, right? But now I do. But back then I didn't. And I was like, I was so shocked that people were actually speaking to me in Spanish because in Mexico for 2.5 years, it had never happened. So here I was in Spain. I was being treated like I was included. I was being treated like I was just someone else in the population. That's because I blend in well here. So I don't look so much different than everybody else does. And because of that, they just assume that I speak Spanish. Everyone here assumes that you speak Spanish. So that means that you're immersed in the language all the time, and it's a motivating factor to learn the language. So as I was saying before, kids here are really, the safety factor is a lot higher here than it is in Mexico or the United States. My son, he's 11. For 2 years now, he's been going to the grocery store on his own. He now occasionally takes the bus to go to school on his own. He can go outside and play in our community playground, which is an enclosed place, with his brother, who is 5, on their own. We sometimes we leave the windows open so that we can hear them, but sometimes we don't. We give him a key. He can come and go as he pleases outside to the play area, and it's no problem. I'm not doubting their safety at all. Whereas in the United States, I would never let them go out to a community playground alone, and definitely not in Mexico. Even when I lived in a neighborhood with armed security, we would have never done that, and I wouldn't do that now at his age. It just wouldn't happen. So that's a huge benefit that we have here, that our kids have more independence and they're safer here. They're also, much like me, they're also treated as individuals. So they can go into a store, they can go buy something, they can get on the bus alone. At 11 years old, no one's questioning them. No one's saying, where are your parents? No one's looking at me and saying, is it okay if he picks this thing out to buy? Because he goes up to the counter, he asks for something. No one looks at the parent to say, hey, is this okay? No, they treat them as the individual. They're there speaking for themselves. They have some money in their hand. They have the confidence to be doing it. In the other side, the customer service person, the cashier, they respect that, and they respond to them like they are, their own individuals. They're independent, and I love that about this country. And that's not something that you get in the United States. If a kid goes up to a register in the United States, usually they don't get recognized. When we were there and my son would try to do it, and he would get a third eye looking at him. Okay. It's just completely, he did not like, when he was there, that he lacked a lot of independence, and he didn't get treated like he was independent. He got treated like he needed a parent with him everywhere he went. And if there wasn't one, it was like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? So that's a big positive with Spain over the two countries, United States and Mexico. So the other point is healthcare. Healthcare in Spain is very accessible, and it's rated very highly throughout the world. In Mexico, one of the things that keeps us in Spain over going back to Mexico is not only the quality of the healthcare, but the access to it. So in Mexico, whenever you go to the doctor, and I've already made videos about this, 4 years ago when we first got here, but whenever you go to the doctor, you have to prepay. You have to prepay before you get in and have your procedure done, or if you're in an emergency situation, after the fact, you have to pay in full. Your account has to be completely paid off, or they will not release you. This is not just hearsay. This is not just things that I've read on the internet that I've heard other people talk about. This was my lived experience, okay? I had 2 kids. Both of them were in a hospital for emergency situations, and both of them had to be paid in full before they could be discharged. And one of them actually was in the equivalent of the NICU in Mexico. So he was there for 10 days when he was born. And it was what would be considered a high bill there at a private healthcare facility. It was supposed to be a high-end hospital where we had a really terrible experience at. I would never trust now a private hospital in Mexico for my kids' emergency care because of the experience that we went through there. It was actually a really big factor in why we came to Spain from leaving from that experience. It was so traumatic. And I still, when I think about it, I still get super stressed out about it. But anyhow, my family had to raise money in order for my 10-day-old to be able to come home. And they will just happily keep him there day after day after day, accumulating the balance and not release until you have that balance paid in full. And that's not just paying the hospital. You have to pay the hospital. You have to pay the individual pediatricians. You have to pay every single part of the bill is billed individually, and it all has to be paid off before you can leave. They will hold you there against your will. I mean, I've heard stories of them putting guards outside of people's hospital rooms until they had the money paid. That didn't happen to us, but I've shared in details of the story of our situation, which is probably more accurate than what I could give now because it was made within like a year of it happening. So I would recommend that you go back and look at that in case you want, and I will link it here. So, as I've said, the positives with going to Mexico are freedom to homeschool and the lower cost of taxes. But we have to ask ourselves if these benefits actually are worth the cost of leaving Spain and not having the higher taxes. And for us right now, they're not. We're not willing to pay, 10, 20, 30,000 euros less in taxes because of how important healthcare is, for an individual. You don't want to give up good healthcare for taxes. So we're not willing to do that. Also, the security factor, the independence that our kids have, the sense of freedom that they have in Spain that they could not get in Mexico. There's not one city in Mexico that you can live in where your kids are going to feel, where you're going to feel that your kids are safe to go out independently. It's just not how life is lived there. And that's nothing to do with the Mexican people, there are many Mexican people that I love and that I like. And actually, one of my favorite things about Mexico are the people. But the people don't run the country, and they're not in charge of security, right? There are other factors at play here. And so right now, that's not going to change. And so for us, it's not worth it. But our middle ground country is Ireland. So what are the chances that we would ever leave Spain and go to Ireland? This is the country that's always been on our list to return to, not to return to, obviously. The United States is our country to return to, maybe one day. But our country to possibly move to after living in Spain for a while and my husband getting citizenship was Ireland. Ireland has the benefit of having one of the official languages is English. They also have freedom to home educate. And they also have many Christian evangelical Protestant churches, which we're Protestant Christians, and that's something that's hard to find here. So those are three benefits for us for moving to Ireland. The downside is that the cost of living is so high. And because we've chose to live in a city in Spain that has one of the lowest costs of living in the country, it's hard to compare any city in Ireland to the cost of living in Zaragoza, Spain. Dublin, Galway, Cork, they're all higher than Zaragoza. There's Waterford and Wexford. There's the southeastern section of Ireland, which gets the most sun out of the year, the least amount of rain, but still a lot, that has the lower cost of living that is most similar to Zaragoza. But then, we really love living in a big city with lots of people, and we wouldn't have that if we didn't live in either Cork or Dublin. And the housing situation in Cork alone would cost $2,000 to $2,500 or more for even just a 3-bedroom house. We've already looked. We've done tons of research. The positive side is that with our income earning situation, the taxes would be less. In some cases, they could be 50% less for us as long as we kept the number underneath they have 2 categories there. You have a limit depending on if you're married or not, up to a certain number. And then if you're married, you have a limit to another number. So depending on how we organized ourselves, our taxes could be considerably less. But if you take the cost of taxes and you take the cost of living and you put it all together, we end up with about the same as what we have in Spain. And then we have the negatives, right? The climate, the sun, the rain, the lack of sun, having to readjust to a new culture and a new community when we're already fairly well adapted here. My biggest weakness still is always probably going to be the language, even though I now have a rather higher language of Spanish than I've had ever, obviously. Just the culture. I'm readapting to a culture and going through all the culture shocks. I am adapted to the Spanish culture now. I know what to expect, even if I can't always say what I need to say. And I loathe to have to go through that again, the culture shocks, the readapting to what do you do in this situation? How do you talk to people and all of that? The things that you don't know until you get into a country. You don't know what it's like there until you actually experience it. And so basically, personally, I just don't want to go through that again, okay? So one day, maybe, if the taxes increase high enough for us in Spain, the total cost of living in Ireland versus living in Spain, maybe Spain will end up losing, and then we'll have to consider the climate. That'll be the biggest factor. I mean, I don't know if we would stay in Spain just for the climate. The other factor that I do consider about Ireland is that they have a good reputation for their higher education, especially universities. And I really like what I see, that the majority of that country is educated at a university level. In fact, I just recently saw online that it's difficult to get even a basic like office job there without a college degree, because so many people have college degrees. So in that way, it's kind of similar to the United States. And I like that expectation of a university education that's built into the culture there. I like that. I also like what I see on their websites, their school websites, about how they do secondary school. So this is something that I'm always looking at and always thinking about, because I have a child that's still in primary who's going to go into secondary. And, it's always like, maybe that's what we should do. Let's see how secondary goes. Let's see how the next year of life goes in Spain, to see if we end up seriously looking at moving to Ireland. To give you an update, we've just finished in November. We just had our last autónomo payment, which is the self-employment payment in Spain. That's on the flat plan, which is like 85 euros a month. And that covers Social Security and autónomo fees, Social Security, healthcare, and whatever else it all goes to. Everyone gets that on their first year's autónomo. So my husband became a citizen last September, and then he became autónomo here. And then we had the full year of autónomo fees. So starting in December, our autónomo fees are going to be moved into the category that they belong in based on the income level. And so from next month, being December, and throughout the whole entire next year, we're going to have our first full year of paying autónomo or self-employment fees at the level that we're supposed to be in for our income. So that's going to be an adjustment. And that's going to be a real, we're going to have to decide next year, throughout the next year, is this something that we can live with and continue doing, knowing that every year the monthly autónomo fees are going to go up. In Ireland, everyone pays, if you're self-employed, everyone pays that fee yearly with their income taxes. So it's not something that you have to be looking to do every single month. And it's also not as high. It's not nearly as high. And they don't tax as much income there. They have more, I don't know if it's deductions or credits or whatever, but you can go online and find a tax calculator for the different countries, and you can see for yourself what I'm talking about, that the limits are different and the amount of taxes are less. So we'll see. It's not off the table to go back to Ireland. I think that if we possibly went to Ireland and it didn't work out, we would either come back to Spain or go to Mexico. We are also in the throes of the U.S. immigration system, where, if you don't know, my husband has had an immigration ban, or will have an immigration ban. He doesn't officially have it yet, but he is having his appointment sometime towards the beginning of next year. It actually was scheduled for this December, but we canceled it because we needed a document. Now they've told us that once we get the document, we can write to them and they will give us an appointment for about 6 weeks from the date that we send the email. So that's something that we're working on right now. So hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, we will know more about, are we going to stay in Spain? What are our outlooks for returning to the United States, if ever? And would we ever move to Ireland or Mexico? Okay, so I hope that this video has given you some things to think about when it comes to moving to Spain, the differences between living here and living in Mexico, the things that we consider as a multicultural family, as far as where we should live, what other countries could we go to. We're already past the stage of coming here on visas, getting citizenships, integrating our kids, them learning the language, me learning the language. We're there. We're at that point in our little plan that we made 5 years ago. And so you see where my mind is at. Now this will give you some things to think about when it comes to where should you go? What are the differences between Spain, Ireland, and Mexico that I've discovered up to this point and that I've lived through as well? So I would love to have any of your questions in the comments. I would also love a like on this video. And if you want to see more from me, you can click subscribe, and that way you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks, and I'll see you later.